Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Yashodanandana Braja Jananandana Yashodanandana Braja Jananandana Jamuna Tira Vanacari Jamuna Tira Vanacari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Yamuna Tira Vanacari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Swasaram Shrivrajagacharya Siddhar Sadasamad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada ki Jai Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki Jai Prem se Gaur Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivas Adi Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki Jai Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gaur Gopinath Sam Kund Radha Kund Giridhar ki Jai वृंदावन धाम की जय नवद्वीप धाम की जय स्वामी तो भक्तबिंद की जय गंगा माई की जय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी देवी की जय भक्ति देवी की जय स्वामी तो भक्तबिंद की जय All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to the assembled Lord. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Kush Prabhu.
How are you?
I'm fine. Happy to see you.
We did. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I'll put the verse on the screen, please.
Okay. So can we start?
Yes, Maharaj.
Okay. Narayana namaskritya narachaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudirayat nastaprayasva bhadresu nityam bhagavatam sevaya bhagavati uttamasloke bhakti bhavati naistiki. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 10, verse 22. Saiva Bhuyo Nija Virya Choditam Swajiva Mayam Prakritim Sri Shaktim Anama Rupat Mani Rupanamani Vitisha Mano Nu Shashara Shastrakrit Saiva Bhuyo Nija Virya Choditam Swajivam Mayam Prakritim Sri Shatim Anama Rupatmani Rupanamani Vitisha Mano Nu Shashara Shastrakrit Saiva Bhuyo Nija Virya Choditam Swajiva Mayam Prakritim Sri Shaktim Anama Rupatmani Rupanamani Vidisha Mano Nu Shashara Shastrakrit. Word for word translation. Saha, he, Eva, thus, Bhuya, again, Nija, own personal, Virya, potency, Choditam, performance of, Swa, own, Jiva, living being, Mayam, external energy, Prakritim, onto material nature, Shaktim, while recreating, Anama, without mundane designations, Rupa Atmani, forms of the soul, Rupa Namani, forms and names, Vidit Shatmanaha, desiring to award, Anushashara, entrusted, Shastrakit, the compiler of revealed scriptures. Translation. The personality of Godhead, again desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, place them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. Srila Prabhupada's purport. The living entities are parts and parcels of the Lord. They are of two varieties, namely Nitya Mukta and Nitya Bada. The Nitya Muktas are eternally liberated souls, and they are eternally engaged in the reciprocation of transcendental loving service with the Lord in his eternal abode, beyond the manifested mundane creations. But the Nitya Bada, or eternally conditioned souls, are entrusted to his external energy, Maya, for rectification of their rebellious attitude toward the Supreme Father. Nitya Badas are eternally forgetful of their relation with the Lord as parts and parcels They are bewildered by the illusory energy as products of matter, and thus they are very busy in making plans in the material world for becoming happy. They go on merrily with plans, but by the will of the Lord, both the plan makers and the plans are annihilated at the end of a certain period, as above mentioned. This is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita 9.7 as follows. O son of Kunti, at the end of the millennium, all the living entities merge into my nature. And again, when the time of creation is ripe, I begin creation by the agency of my external energy. The word Guya indicates again and again. That is to say, the process of creation, maintenance, and annihilation is going on perpetually by the external energy of the Lord. He is the cause of everything. But the living beings who are constitutionally part and parcel of the Lord and are forgetful of the sweet relation are given a chance again and again to get rid of the clutches of the external energy and to revive the living being's consciousness. The revealed scriptures are also created by the Lord. Vedic literatures are the guiding directions for the conditioned souls, so they can get free from the repetition of creation and annihilation of the material world and the material body. The Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, this created world and material energy are under my control. Under the influence of Prakriti, automatically they are created again and again, and this is done by me through the agency of my external energy. Actually, the spiritual spark living entities have no material names or forms. But in order to fulfill their desire to lord it over the material energy of material forms and names, they are given a chance for such false enjoyment. And at the same time, they are given a chance to understand the real position through the revealed scriptures. The foolish and forgetful living being is always busy with false forms and false names. Modern nationalism is a culmination of such false names and false forms. Men are mad after false name and form. The form of a body obtained under certain conditions is taken up as factual, and the name also taken bewilders the conditioned soul into misusing the energy in the name of so many isms. The scriptures, however, supply the clue for understanding the real position, but men are reluctant to take lessons from the scriptures created by the Lord for different places and times. For example, the Bhagavad Gita is the guiding principle for all human beings, but by the spell of material energy, they do not take care to carry out the programs of life in terms of the Bhagavad Gita. Srimad Bhagavatam is a postgraduate study of the knowledge for one who has thoroughly understood the principles of the Bhagavad Gita. Unfortunately, people have no taste for them, and therefore they are under the clutches of Maya for repetition of birth and death. Om Jnana Timiridasya Jnanan Janashalakaya Chakshuramlitam yena tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Sri Guru Sri Yukta Padakamalam Sri Gurum Vaishnavam Sha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragnastam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitam Scha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Tirtha Swaminiti Namine Namaste Krishna Padaya Prabhupada Sri Tatmane Shri Gaura Karuna Shakti Bhakti Tirtha Namine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvise Sasuyavadi Pasachahade Satarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Ivacha Patitanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namini Gaura Trise Namaha Nityanando Vatutendur Vasuda Pranavalabha Janavir Jivita Patir Krishna Prema Prada Prabhu Padmavati Sutta Srimam Sachidananda Purvajaha Bhavom Mata Jagat Rakta Rakta Gaura Kele Varaha Advaitam Haridadvaitar Acharyam Bhakti Shamshanat Bhaktavataram Nitam Samarveta Acharya Shraye Panchatattvamakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyanamami Bhakti Shaktikam Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nanda Gopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Nama Pankajanavaya Nama Pankajamaline Nama Pankajanitraya Namaste Pankajagraye Namo Brahmanya Devaya Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha Jagadithaya Krishnaya Govindaya Namo Namaha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopita Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Jayatam Surato Pango Mama Mandir Matigatmat Sarvaswa Padam Pujo Radha Mandana Mohano Divya Vindaranya Kalpadrumada Srimaranagara Simhastanastau Sri Sri Radha Srila Govinda Devo Christian Libis Divya Manosmarami Shrimam Rasarasaram Vivam Sivata Tatastita Karasan Venu Swanai Gopi Gopinata Sri Estunaha Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavanishwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haritye Devi Krishna Mai Prokta Radhika Paradevata Sarva Lakshmi Mai Sarvam Kanti Samohini Paraha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Srivas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Translation again. The personality of Godhead again, desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, placed them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. Ukam karoti vachalam pankum vajayate green yakri patamahan vande Shri Guru Dina Taranam Paramanam Madhavam Sri Chaitanya Ishwaram Akanda Mandala Karam Vyapta Yena Chara Charam Tat Padam Dashitam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to say a few words in glorification of Srimad Bhagavatam. Before we proceed to say something which may be beneficial for our own spiritual life and probably for the benefit of the audience, we seek the blessings of the assembled Vaishnavas and Vaishnavis so that we can be able to represent Srila Vyasadeva in the discharge of this sacred service. So in this verse, the journey of the living entity into the material world is described. It says the personality of God, and again desiring to give names and forms to his parts and parcels, the living entities, place them under the guidance of material nature. By his own potency, material nature is empowered to recreate. I think I can see His Holiness Bhakti Damodara Maharaj on the platform. I don't know whether Bhakti Vasudev Maharaj is also here. And maybe Shlakavi Chandra Swami Maharaj is also here. Please, I need their blessings to be able to say something. Without the mercy of the Vaishnavas, exalted Vaishnavas, we have no place in the kingdom of Krishna. So we need their mercy to be able to execute our service. So Srila Prabhupada mentions at the opening of his purport that there are two varieties of living entities. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in his Jivadam, discusses very extensively the different kinds of souls. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur says there are different groups. First, there are two broad divisions of jivas called Nitya Muktas and Nitya Baddhas. The Nitya Muktas are souls that have no experience of material existence. They've never come into the realm of material existence. So they have no idea, they have no experience of what is going on in this side of the creation of the Lord. And the Nitya Baddhas are those souls that have been conditioned from time immemorial. So the Nitya Muktas are also divided. We have the Aishwarya Gata Nitya Muktas. Aishwarya Gata Nitya Muktas. These are the souls that are associates of Lord Narayan in Vaikuntha. And they are manifested by Sankrishan. Sankrishan is the expansion of Lord Balaram. So the Aishwarya Gata Nitya Muktas, the associates of Lord Narayan in Vaikuntha, They are manifested by Sankrishan. Then we have the Madhurya Gata Nitya Muktas. Madhurya Gata Nitya Muktas. They are the associates of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. And these souls are manifested by Lord Balaram. So even in the spiritual world, there are categories of souls. The Aishwarya Gata Nitya Muktas and the Madhurya Gata Nitya Muktas. Those that live on the planet of Krishna, Goloka Vrindavan, and are eternal associates of Krishna, and those who live in the Vaikuntha planets and are associates of Lord Narayan. So these different souls are there in the spiritual world. Then in the material world, the Nitya Badas are also divided. We have the Mumukshus and the Bubukshus. The Mumukshus are those who are undergoing so much pain, so much misery, that they are tired of the material world. They have experienced so much difficulty. They have gone through so much tribulation that they are no more interested in this material world. They have become very detached from this material world. All that they want to do now is to get out. These are called the mumukshus. They are fed up with material existence. They are tired of material existence and they want to get out. They don't want any physical existence, material body, material existence anymore. Then we have the bubukshus. Bubukshus are those who hanker after earthly material enjoyment, and they make elaborate plans how to exploit material nature. So most of the karmis, fruity workers, they are in this class, bubukshus. Bubukshu Badajivas. They are very attached to the world and they don't want to hear anything spiritual. Their plans is how they can exploit material nature and remain here. Now the mumukshus, when they become liberated from this material world, they also fall into two categories. They are the Bhagavat, Bhavapati, Mumukshus. That is, they have attained the supreme bliss upon attaining the very nature of the Lord, like those who attain to Swarupa Siddhi, Swarupa Moksha. They attain to the very forms of the Lord. Those are the Bhagavat, Bhavapati, Mumuksha Jivas. Then there are the Ninja Swarupa Pati Mumuksha Jivas, who are content with the bliss of their own nature, their spiritual nature. So these living entities are all manifested from the Jiva Shakti. The Chit Shakti of the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifests the expansions of the Supreme Lord, and they are complete. The Chit Shakti manifests the expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the avatars. They are complete. The Chit Shakti, the Jiva Shakti, on the other side, manifests the Jiva Tattva. The Jiva Tattva, they are said to be incomplete in the sense that they are not as complete as the expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are complete in every aspect. But the Jiva Tattva, who are manifested as the Nitya Baddhas, they are incomplete because they do not come up to the level of the avatars, the expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So these Nitya Baddhas are actually created by Mahavishnu. So there are different jivas manifested by different personalities. The Madhurya Gata jivas are manifested by Balaram, and the Aishwarya Gata jivas manifested by Sankrishna. And the Nitya Baddha jivas are manifested by Mahavishnu. So Mahavishnu is said to be the Lord of the Nitya Baddhas. And so Mahavishnu is responsible for creating the material wealth in order to give the jivas the opportunity to try to satisfy their desire to lord it over material nature, and at the same time, learn how to return home back to Godhead. So the material creation is meant to serve two purposes. First is to give chance to the living entities who are rebellious against the authority of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so that they can try to imitate the Supreme Lord away from the Supreme Lord. And that is why we're all doing in this material world. We are all trying to imitate the Supreme Authority, which is Krishna. We want that whatever we decide should be kowtow to, should be accepted and nothing else. So we are imitating the Supreme Authority, Krishna. That is our desire, and so Mahavishnu arranges for the material manifestation to give the living entity that opportunity. The second reason for material creation is after going through a lot of pain, after going through a lot of disappointments, after going through a lot of miseries, the living entity comes to the platform of mumukshu, where he becomes detached from the material world, he loses interest in the material world, and wants to go back home, back to Godhead. So that is the purpose of the material creation. So, but this material creation is so designed that when the living entity enters it, it is very difficult to get out. because it's a place of darkness. This universe without the sun and the moon is completely dark. In fact, it is said that when Lord Brahma was manifested from the lotus flower of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, he was in total darkness. He could not see anything. He could not understand anything. He was in complete darkness. But due to his great intelligence, he heard a sound, tapa, and he understood with his great intelligence that I must perform austerity in order to understand things as they are. And so immediately Brahma resorted to austerities. And so that austerity helped Brahma to gain knowledge. It helped Brahma to attract Krishna, to reveal the scriptures, to reveal knowledge, to reveal everything he needed from within the heart. Tene Brahma Hirdaya Adi Kavaye. Brahma became the first student. Krishna entered the heart of Brahma and revealed to him the necessary knowledge for creation. And as a result of that knowledge gained by Brahma from his austerity, he was able to create the moon and the sun to lit up the dark universe. So Brahma, he is very intelligent. So even though he is within this material creation, but he understands his purpose. He understands his duty. He understands his service. And so he's committed to his service. It is said that the living entity, the best living entity, the most enlightened living entity, the most advanced living entity, he becomes the Brahma at the end of this creation. That living entity becomes the next Brahma. But the rest of us, we become entangled, remain entangled in the meshes of Maya. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bulise Jiva Anadi Bahir Mukha. Forgetting Krishna, the living entity has been attracted by the external future from time immemorial. And the illusory energy of the Lord gives the living entity all kinds of trouble. So when a living entity forgets his position, that is an eternal servant of Krishna, then he becomes entrapped. And to get out of this material world becomes very difficult. Very, very difficult. Actually, we want to get out. That is why we have taken shelter of Krishna consciousness, because we want to get out. But is it so easy to get out? Is it so easy to please Krishna? Is it so easy to forget Maya completely? Is it so easy to give up the false ego? Is it so easy to actually accept our position as servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? It is very difficult. Very, very difficult. So, to get out of this material creation, it is said that the scriptures are required. The Lord manifests the scriptures for the benefit of the living entity. Actually, to revive the living entity's consciousness, revealed scriptures are needed. Very literatures are needed, because they are the guiding principles for the conditioned souls. The conditioned souls are so ignorant. They don't even know that they are not the bodies. So here we are hearing about forms and names, names and forms. These bodies that we have are just material forms, and these names that we have are just material names. So we are attracted to these names and forms, and without spiritual guidance, without scriptural injunctions, we will remain enamored by these forms and names of the material world. But because Krishna is so kind to us, he gave us the scriptures. Sutta Goswami mentions in the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, Anato Pashanam Shakshat Bhakti Yogam Adopsaje Lokasya Ganato Vidyams Chakre Satvata Sahintam. That the miseries of the living entity are superfluous to him, and they can be directly mitigated by the process of bhakti, devotional service. But many of the living entities do not know about this process of devotional service. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva, the author of the Vedic scriptures, compiled the Vedic scriptures. Chakre Satvata Samhitam. He compiled the Samhitas in order to provide knowledge, to provide direction, to provide information how the living entity can leave the material world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his discussion with Sanatana Goswami, also highlights the importance of Vedic scriptures. He says, Maya Mugda Jivera Nahi Swata Krishna Jnana Jivera Kripaya Kaila Krishna Veda Praha. The conditioned soul cannot revive his Krishna consciousness by his own effort, but out of the causeless mercy of the Lord, he compiled the Vedic literatures and its supplements, the Puranas, just to give guidance, just to give direction to the conditioned souls. Maya's business is to keep us in this world. Maya's business is to make us forgetful of our spiritual identity, forgetful of Krishna's identity, forgetful of our relationship between the Jiva and Krishna, forgetful of the spiritual dimension, forgetful of the bliss, the joy, the real life that is present in the spiritual world. All these Maya makes us forget, and Maya offers us this material suffering. And it makes us think this suffering is pleasure. That is actually the problem. The living entity is suffering so much in this world, but he accepts the suffering as pleasure. And so if somebody is suffering and he does not see that he's suffering, how can he even make the attempt to get out? So Maya's game, he's playing with the Jiva, is just amazing. That even though the Jiva is suffering so much, the Jiva is going through so much difficulty, so much embarrassment, still he's thinking, I'm great. He's thinking, I'm wonderful. I have made it. But it's not true. He's simply going through a lot of anxiety, a lot of mental anxiety, a lot of difficulty, a lot of dissatisfaction, a lot of embarrassment. That is what every living entity experiences in this world. Yet, everyone is thinking, I'm great, I'm wonderful, I'm successful, I am this, I am that. This is the machinations of Maya. In fact, it is said that Durga Devi who is the superintendent of this material world, she has two types of mercies. Sakapata Kripa and Niskapata Kripa. Niskapata Kripa is when Durga Devi favors the giver and gives him so much difficulty so that he becomes a mumukshu. He gives up his attachment to the material world and wants to go back home, back to Godhead. But the Sakapata Kripa of Durga Devi is when Durga Devi wants to punish the living entity, he gives him a lot of material opulence, he gives him a lot of material facility, and he becomes attached. And then he thinks he's the Lord of all that he surveys. He's the Lord of the material world. But actually, that will simply perpetuate his existence in this material world. Of course, we are not saying that material resources, wealth, material resources is bad. It's just how it is applied. A devotee can have unlimited material resources, but he does not plan to enjoy them. He plans to utilize them in the service of the Lord. And that is the perfection of ownership. Maheshwara Sarva Loka Maheshwaram, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Krishna the Maheshwara. He is the enjoyer, he is the controller, he is the owner. So when one understands that whatever I own is for Krishna's service, Krishna's pleasure, that is the best method of ownership. So that is required. So the Shastra is necessary for the living entity to gain knowledge of his real position. Mahaprabhu further told Sanatana Goswami, Shastra Guru Atma Rupe Apana Jnana Krishna Mora Prabhu Trata Jivera Haya Jnana. The forgetful conditioned soul is educated by Krishna through the Vedic literatures and the self-realized spiritual master. Through this, he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead and make efforts to get out of the material world and go back home, back to Godhead. So the Vedic literature gives us information about the living entity's relationship with Krishna eternally. This is called Sambandha. And the living entity's activities that will revive his relationship with Krishna, his devotional service is called Abhideya. And when one is able to experience the love of Krishna, the affection for Krishna, that is called Prayojana. So the scriptures, the various scriptures, facilitates these three goals: Sambandha, Abhideya, and Prayojana. That is what the scripture gives us. First, it gives us knowledge, then it gives us the process, and then it gives us the goal. So without scripture, how can we get these things? Therefore, Srila Prabhupada mentions that scripture is very important because it gives guidance to the living entities. So, and that is why devotee association is very important. Devotee association is very important. Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Kripa, Bhakti Swabhava. Associating with devotees, gaining the mercy of Krishna, and being empowered by Bhakti Devi, they are crucial for our advancement in Krishna consciousness. Associating with devotees, gaining the mercy of Krishna, and getting empowered by Bhakti Devi, they are crucial for our advancement in Krishna consciousness. And so a devotee is always eager to gain the association of advanced devotees. He is always eager to get the mercy of Krishna, and is always praying to Bhakti Devi to actually bless him or her so that he can perfect in devotional service. Actually, it is said that without scripture, even Brahma cannot create. So scripture is everything. It is said that Katama ameti yoyam vigyana maya purusha praneshu. Who is the Jiva? The Jiva is a servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Where does the Jiva belong to? The Jiva belongs to the spiritual world. What is the duty of the Jiva? The Jiva's duty is to always engage in Krishna's service. But in the absence of that, the Jiva accepts names and forms in the material world. And these names and forms are very bewildering. In the Vishnu Purana, it is mentioned, Nama Rupam Chabhutanam Kritayam Cha Prapa Chanam. That by reciting the words of the Vedas in the beginning, Lord Brahma was able to create names and forms of the various material elements, rituals, devas, and all other living entities. The Chandogya Upanishad say, Eta itiha manushya indava iti pritim. That by reciting the word ete from the Vedas, Lord Brahma created the devas. By reciting the word Ashrigram, he created human beings. By reciting the word Indava, Lord Brahma created the Pitas. By reciting the word Tira Pavitram, he created the planets. By reciting the word Ashubha, he created songs. And by reciting the word Vishwani, he created mantras. So in this way, Lord Brahma took shelter of the Vedas even to create the material names and forms for the benefit of the erring jivas, for the nitya baddhas who want to exploit material nature. Therefore, the importance and the eternality of Vedic scriptures are highlighted by this verse. Because without this verse, without these mantras, Lord Brahma could not have created. And without this, the Vedic enlightenment, without Krishna enlightening Brahma from within the heart, Brahma would have remained ignorant. So therefore, anyone who wants to get out of this dark material creation, a representation of ignorance, one must take shelter of the Vedic scriptures, because they supply the clue of our real position. They give direction how to return to the spiritual world. They give us the information how to tread the path back home, back to Godhead. And the Bhagavad Gita, as Srila Prabhupada mentions, contains the principles of Vedic literatures. And when one is conversant with the Bhagavad Gita, one can now study the Srimad Bhagavatam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is described as Paramahamsa Sahitam. Paramahamsa Sahitam. It is a scripture of great personalities, very advanced souls. So after one has studied Bhagavad Gita thoroughly, and understands the principles of Bhagavad Gita, it is recommended that one should study the Srimad Bhagavatam. And by studying the Srimad Bhagavatam, one can develop taste for service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And when one develops taste in the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one can easily give up this material world, which is attracting our attention every moment. Thank you very much. Any comments or questions? I have only 5 minutes left.
Thank you, Maharaj, for a nice class.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you so much.
I appreciate it.
You were mentioning
Any
about
comments or questions?
the Devotee Association. So yesterday, during the class of His Holiness B.T. Swami, he was mentioning that there is nothing around us except Krishna. So when we were discussing about the class, we also mentioned that even when devotees are offending us, chastising us, it's also Krishna. So we shouldn't only see the good things as Krishna, because Guru say everything around us, there's nothing but Krishna. And now you talk about devotee association. So I wanted to bring up the argument of yesterday that even devotees' disturbances and chastisements and offense is also Krishna. Is it correct?
Yes and no. Yes, in a sense that nothing happens without Krishna's sanction. That is true. And not even a blade of grass will move without Krishna's sanction. So whatever is happening, Srila Gurudev said, it is Krishna's mercy. Krishna brings us a certain amount of experience that we need to go through so that we can learn to give up the material wealth. So if we see in that light that whatever is happening to us, good or bad, is actually Krishna is sanctioning for our spiritual evolution. So if we see it that way, then we will take advantage of even the worst situation. Yeah, we know the Bhagavatam says that the one who is tolerant, who accepts whatever happens, and who is ready to suffer whatever reactions he has to go through while he's waiting for the mercy of Krishna, such a soul becomes the right higher. He has the right to inherit the kingdom of God. So yes, Krishna brings us all kinds of difficulties, all kinds of things for our advancement. And so we accept that it's Krishna's mercy. But a devotee should not also try to become troublesome for others simply because it is said that whatever difficulty a devotee experiences is Krishna's mercy. So therefore, I would go on rampage and disturb every devotee, give them so much more, and I'm thinking, oh, it's Krishna's mercy. That is not right. We should not do that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Another question is from the Mudra Pandit. Prabhu, please unmute yourself.
Okay, it's Guru Das who is asking the question. Thank you,
Okay.
Maharaj. Unfortunately, I didn't come in time, but I came at the point when you mentioned that the jivas are coming from Mahavishnu. So I have two questions. If the jivas are coming from Mahavishnu, if they should go back, going back home, would it not be going back to Vishnu? Would they surpass their source where they come from? Second, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, it is said that there are two types of jivas. Those who are eternally conditioned and those who are eternally liberated. So I would want to know if the eternally liberated ones are purposely is by choice or is imposed on them, or the Nitya Bada is imposed on them.
Prabhu, we already discussed that in the beginning, that the Nitya Badas and Nitya Muktas, there are different categories. The Nitya Muktas, there are two categories. We have the Aishwarya Gata Nitya Muktas and the Madhurya Gata Nitya Muktas. The Aishwarya Nitya Gata Muktas are associates of Narayan in Vaikuntha, and the Madhurya Gata Nitya Muktas are the associates of Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan. And these Madhurya Gata Nitya Muktas are manifested from Lord Balaram, and the Aishwarya Gata Nitya Muktas of Vaikuntha are manifested by Lord Shankarshan. And then the Nitya Badas are manifested by Mahavishnu. So actually, Baladev, Sankarshan, Mahavishnu is one personality, but different roles they're playing. Balaram is the original, Sankarshan, then Sankarshan is in Vaikuntha, then Sankarshan of Mahavishnu. These are all expansions of Balaram. So when the giver attains perfection, he goes back either to Vaikuntha as Aishwarya Gata Nitya Mukta or Madhurya Gata Nitya Mukta. So depending on his relationship with the Supreme Lord, he goes back to the various locations. It doesn't matter whether he is coming from Mahavishnu or whatever. When he has attained perfection, then he goes back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and engages in his service. I think what is the next question you asked?
I think
I've answered both.
I think you answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is that. Thank you very much. Yes, I think Sahadev Prabhu's hand is up.
Yes, Maharaj. Sahadev Prabhu, next person, please.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much for the wonderful class as usual.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Prabhu.
Krishna,
Thank
good
you
to
for
see
giving
you.
me a chance.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, my question has to do with annihilations.
Annihilation, okay.
Yes, I understand there are 4 different types, but generally like 2 types. That's at the end of 1 day of Lord Brahma, which is a kalpa, which is 1,000 of 4 ages together makes 1 day of Lord Brahma, which is a kalpa.
Yeah.
Which is really insane to think about, but that's what it is. So at the end of Lord Brahma's day, which is 1,000 ages of the 4, 1,000 times of the 4 yugas.
Yeah.
The living entities will all disappear. When we disappear, do we disappear into Mahavishnu?
Hello?
Or it is only at the end
Hello?
of Lord Brahma's life, which is
Okay.
100 years before we enter into the body of Mahavishnu, or every 12 hours of Lord Brahma, all living entities enter into Mahavishnu, and then after the 100 years of Lord Brahma, all 11 entities enter into Mahavishnu.
In our first class, Kedali.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
We shall stop talking behind.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Yeah, it is mentioned that there are actually 4 different kinds of annihilations.
So you reached it by 10 p.m.
There is
By 10
occasional,
p.m., 3 hours.
occasional
All right, I'm hosting on
annihilation.
Zoom also. After this, I will host Asia Europe again this night. Tired of all this.
There is
Huh?
occasional annihilation,
No, I can't say you're a good person.
which happens
No one.
Which
Mr.
happens-
Prabhu, your microphone is on. Thank you.
which happens when there's a change over of manus. When there's a change over of manus, there is some partial annihilation. When one manu is going and another manu is coming, there is partial annihilation. That is when the Master Avatar appeared. Master Avatar appeared to Satyavrata Muni of Maharaj at the junction between one Manu and the other Manu. At that time, the scriptures are inundated. And so there was a need for a golden boat to take the sages, to take the scriptures, to take every speech. That is what is described in the Bible as Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark is nothing but the golden boat that Matsya Avatar gave to Satyavrata at the end of one Manu and the incoming of the next Manu. So that is called occasional annihilation. And then there is this Brahma's end of Brahma's day. When Brahma's day comes to an end, there is also an annihilation. And then, of course, the final annihilation when Lord Brahma's life comes to an end. So it is said that when during the occasional annihilation, as well as at the end of Brahma's day's annihilation, the living entities do not enter into Mahavishnu. They actually enter into Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. Of course, there is no difference between Shirodakashaya Vishnu, Garbhodakashaya Vishnu, and Mahavishnu, Karanodakashaya Vishnu. They are simply different expansions of the same personality. But it is said that during the occasional annihilation, when one Manu is taken over from the other Manu, one government is going and the next government is coming. And when Brahma goes to sleep, the living entities enter into the body of Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. Actually, they enter into the lotus stem of upon which Brahma is born, and that is withdrawn into Garbhodakashaya Vishnu. And at the beginning of the day of Brahma, again, they are manifested. But when there is a final annihilation, when Lord Brahma's life has come to an end, and everything has to close, the creation, the material creation is closed down completely, then the living entities, they enter into the body of Mahavishnu.
Well, thank you very much. I asked this question, and I think it's also quite related to the first question, because there are other schools of thought. Okay, so here are the four kinds of annihilation: constant, occasional, material, and final.
No, yeah.
Like you were explaining. Okay, good. So there are other schools of thought that consciously attempt to disprove Srila Prabhupada by Srila Prabhupada saying that going back home, back to Godhead, that they claim the living entities that are down here, Nitya Badas, have never come from the spiritual world in the first place. We've not come from Goloka Vrindavan, we've only come from Mahavishnu. Because like what you read, and was that Gurudas Prabhu who asked the question?
Yeah.
My obeisance, Prabhuji. So it says that the living entities enter into the body of Mahavishnu. And then at the time of creation, then these living entities are released again. So based on statements like this, they say that the living entity's original source is Mahavishnu. But I would like you to throw a little more light. If that simply means, to my little understanding, is that we are all parts and parcels of Krishna in his divine abode. Whether we are in Goloka Vrindavan or in Vaikuntha with the Narayan forms, is the spiritual world. And then when we come into this material world, and at the end of Lord Brahma's life, when we are unable to go back home, back to Godhead, then we merge into the body of Mahavishnu. And then at the time of creation, then the living entities are released. But that does not mean that that is their original source. This is my understanding. And if I'm not right, you can throw more light so that, because it's quite confusing to a lot of devotees. And I do not think that anybody can disprove anything Srila Prabhupada has ever said.
Yes. Thank you. Actually, in ISKCON, these two philosophies are there. I've encountered a number of devotees who try to say that that actually we, the Nitya Badas, we have never been to the spiritual world. And they even use the Bhagavad Gita as the evidence, because in the Gita, I think chapter 8, verse 6, where Krishna says, Yad Gatva Nivartante, the one who goes there never comes back here. Krishna made that statement. Yad Gatva Nivartante, anybody who goes to the spiritual world never comes back here. So their argument is that we have never been there, because if we're there, we don't come back here. That is the argument, you know. But actually, the fact is, Krishna is the source of all incarnations. Krishna is the source of Balaram. Balaram is the source of Sankarshan. Sankarshan is the source of Mahavishnu. So when we talk of Balaram manifesting some jivas, Sankarshan manifesting some jivas, and Mahavishnu manifesting some jivas, what are we talking about? We are talking about the different divisions, but actually all of them are coming from one source, and that is Krishna. So that means that every living entity actually is coming from that one source, which is Krishna. So to say that a living entity has no experience of the spiritual world, that is not right. Because without Krishna, there cannot be Balaram, And without Balaram, there cannot be Sankrishan. Without Sankrishan, there cannot be Mahavishnu. So their origin is the spiritual world. Just for the purpose of creation that they are manifested. So before the creation, where were they? They are in the Supreme Lord himself. Before they are manifested for the purpose of material creation. And so it means that every living entity comes from Krishna. It's just that there's a division of service, division of duties. Baladev manifests one set of living entities in Goloka Vrindavan. Sankarshan manifests another set of living entities in Vaikuntha, and Mahavishnu manifests another set of living entities in the material world. But actually, every living entity comes from one source. That is Krishna. And Krishna makes that very clear. Mama Ivam Sojiva Loke, Jiva Bhuta Sanatanaha. He made it very clear, absolutely clear, sufficiently clear, that every living entity is part and parcel of him. Eternally. He didn't even say temporarily, eternally. So I agree that every living entity has its origin from the spiritual world. How we have come into this material world, that's what Prabhupada says, is very difficult because it happened from time immemorial. It is beyond history. It is beyond our understanding. So in trying to explain how we have come into the material world is difficult. But we came from the spiritual world. And even the material creation, where does it come from? The material world has no origin except from the spiritual world itself. It's Krishna's energy. Krishna's energy, he transforms into the subtle energy and then into the physical. Material creation has no existence. Its existence is on the spiritual world. So everything is on the spiritual world. I don't know whether that answers you. Bhakti Damadara Maharaj can add some more if you're not satisfied. Maharaj, you want to say something in this regard?
I think it's muted. Okay.
Sila Bhakti Notakura. The Jaiva Dharma you were quoting, Bhakti Notakura said that we came from the spiritual world.
That's right.
He has so many quotations there, which shows that we came from the spiritual world.
Thank you.
And the Prabhupada said this thing is so difficult to understand. And I was telling you what you last week. Tracing, it is actually very difficult for Jivas to understand it, very, very difficult. Therefore, the word somehow or other used in Sister Second Prayer and also in the Bhakti Takora's Prasadam Prayer. Somehow or other. That means it is very, very difficult. Somehow or other. It can be this, can be that. And when I trace it personally, it is one must be very careful, otherwise it will become offensive. That's my personal experience. So it's better to follow what the Prabhupada said. So when we get out, we will understand.
We understand. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you got your answer.
Yes.
All right.
I mean, your answer was great, and Bhakti Maharaj also reaffirmed what you said, which is beautiful.
George Omega, unmute, please.
Okay. Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji.
Dandavat pranams.
All glories to Krishna Prabhupada, all glories to Krishna Gurudev.
Actually, you answered my question partially, but I want a clarification actually. I would like to know that the eternally conditioned souls, as well as the internally liberated souls. And you made mention that when you forget Krishna, that is when we become conditioned. So my question here is, can it be a point in time that internally conditioned souls can become internally liberated, and the internally liberated also can be internally conditioned? Because when we remember Krishna, that means we are awake from our dreams and we see reality. So at that point, can we say we are, I don't know how to put it, but I hope you understand my question.
I understand your question.
Okay, Maharaj, thank you very much.
Yes. The eternally liberated souls, they have no experience of Maya. No experience. And they will never experience Maya because they are eternal associates of Krishna. Even when they come into the material world, they don't see the material world, they only see Krishna, they see the spiritual world. Like Srila Prabhupada says, that he has never forgotten Krishna, even when he was in the material world, writing the books and establishing ISKCON and so on and so forth. Srila Prabhupada did not see Maya. He was always seeing Krishna every moment. So even when the Nitya Siddhas, they come into the material world, they are not conditioned. They only come to perform their service and go back. So they have no experience of Maya. That is the position of the eternally liberated Nitya Muktas. For the Nitya Baddhas, yes, they were one time in the spiritual world, but because their stay in the material world is so long a period, they are described as Nitya Baddhas. Because they have stayed for such a long time, immemorable time, you can't trace the time, therefore they are described as Nitya Baddhas. But that does not mean that they were created by Maya, no, they come from the spiritual world. So, but once you get out of the material world, you don't have to come back to the material world again because of the experience. So when they get out, then they stay forever in the spiritual world. They don't come back here. So it is possible that once one leaves the material world and joins the Nitya Siddhas, Nitya Muktas, he also becomes, in fact, they are called Baddha Muktas. They are Nitya Muktas and they are Baddha Muktas. Baddha Mukta means he was once conditioned and now he is liberated. He was once conditioned and now he's liberated. So that a soul is called Baddha Muktas. So he's still classified. Even though he will not come back to the material world again, but he's still classified as a Baddha Mukta, a liberated soul from the material world. But those Nitya Muktas, they never experience Maya. Even if they come into the material world, they have no experience of Maya. They are always in blissful consciousness, blissful Krishna consciousness throughout, and they don't see Maya. Actually, Maya is our vision. For a conditioned soul, Maya is everywhere. But for a liberated soul, Krishna is everywhere. The material energy can be converted into spirit, and the spiritual energy can be converted into Maya. It is a matter of choice. So, for the Nitya Siddhas, they don't see Maya anywhere, they see spirit everywhere. And for the conditioned soul, he doesn't see spirit, he sees Maya everywhere. So the process of Krishna consciousness is to convert our vision from seeing Maya everywhere to seeing Krishna everywhere. And once you come to that platform of seeing Krishna everywhere, then you enter into the Nitya Siddhas zone, but you still have a tag, you still have a classification as Baddha Mukta, one who has ever been to the material world and had some experience with the material world. But then you don't come back here again. You join the Nitya Siddhas.
Okay, thank you very much, Maharaj. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So if there are no more questions.
Thank you, Maharaj. There's no, okay, Sadev, hand is up again. Sadev, last question, please. Unmute.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Well, thank you for accepting my question. I'm sure we've all heard, read, I haven't read, but I've heard many times where Srila Prabhupada was giving an example of a president or a king or a prime minister who was being waited on, and the people who were waiting on him later on looked through the window and saw that he was playing the role of a horse, and his grandchild was sitting on his back, and he was happily running around with the grandchild. So that is the king or the president playing that role, and he likes it that way. But in his governmental office, he's never going to play like that.
Yeah.
So we know how Krishna and the Gopas and the Gopis play like they do not actually see Krishna as God, they see him as friend. Some even think that they are more powerful than Krishna, and Krishna loves it that way. But Bhishma Dev, whom we discussed a few weeks ago, it is said that when he was on his deathbed, when Krishna and the Pandavas visited him, he was in ecstasy seeing Krishna, because as he was seeing Krishna in his Narayan form.
Yeah.
Because that is his eternal relationship with Krishna. So my question is, if Bhishma Dev's relationship with Krishna is in the form of the Narayan, which is a worship of awe and a reverence, then how does Bhishma Dev have this ras with Krishna of chivalry? Because one cannot play chivalry with his lord, just like the presidents and his ministers cannot play chivalry with him in his office, but the sons, the grandsons can play such sports with him in the house. So if Bhishma Dev's relationship, eternal relationship with Krishna, is that of the Narayan form, which is 400 form, which is awe and reverence, how does that chivalry come into play? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. It's interesting. Actually, it's like the case of the Jai and Vijay. Jai and Vijay, they were servants of the Lord in Vaikuntha. But when the Lord wanted to wrestle with them, wanted to engage in a mock fight with them, he sent them down into the material world and made them his enemies. And in this way, Hiranyakashipu and Hiranyaksha, they fought with the Lord, and they gave him such joy that the Lord relished. So this chivalry is one of the 12 relationships a jiva can have with Krishna. We have the 5 primary relationships, and we have the 7 secondary relationships. And Bhishma Dev happens to be related to the Lord in one of those 7 secondary relationships, which is chivalry. So in this spiritual world, the living entities, they serve the Lord. In Vaikuntha is awe and reverence. But within that awe and reverence, they exhibit their relationship with the Lord. They please him according to their relationship. And actually, if they have to fight, there is no fighting the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada said there is no room for fighting with the Lord in the spiritual world. Therefore, that is why it is arranged for the Lord to come into the material world and his devotee to come into the material world, and then this fighting spirit is exhibited. But in the spiritual world, the same devotees are serving the Lord in awe and reverence. In a particular way that nourishes their eternal relationship. But when it comes to the practical way of demonstrating this chivalry, then they have to come into the material realm to demonstrate that, because there is no question of fighting the Lord in the spiritual world. But nevertheless, Bhishmadev is a servant of Lord Narayan. He went back to the spiritual world. He continued to serve the Lord there in awe and reverence. But within that awe and reverence, he is able to satisfy the Lord according to his relationship. I don't know whether I've tried to explain. If you don't get it, maybe we can seek the are you okay with that?
Very much, yes.
Okay.
Very much. Very, very
Okay.
much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
so much.
Thank you,
Thank
Maharaj, for your nice class.
Thank you. For
Nice to see you today. Hope to see you again. So we ask all devotees to kindly unmute yourselves. They chant Hare Krishna to Maharaj for comment, please.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna,
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 Hare
Hare Hare,
Hare Rama,
Hare
Hare
Rama,
Rama,
Rama
Rama,
Rama,
Hare
Hare
Hare.
Hare. Haribo.
Jai.
Jai.